So it's kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender meets Raylo. If that doesn't intrigue you about a story, like maybe your reading taste is just boring. Sorry, this was so chaotic. This was literally my worst video. Hey y'all, my name's Mare. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to give y'all my favorite young adult fantasy books. Or I'm going to give you guys my top recommendations for the young adult fantasy genre. I am so excited for this video because young adult fantasy is actually my favorite genre. I think I've decided. I love the characters and the tropes and the plot and the magic system. I just think that there's something so fun about young adult fantasy that I don't get from adult fantasy, and I don't read a lot of adult fantasy, so that's on me. Maybe I do get those things and I just don't read them, but I just think that there's something so special about young adult books because it's coming of age, it's people just learning how to be people, and I love that so much. Also, before we get started, I just want to say I feel very main character-esque today. I accidentally did my hair like this, and like low-key I'm living for it. I feel like a Disney princess. All right, now we can just yell and scream about all my favorite young adult fantasy books. Let's get into this. So the first book I want to chat with you guys about is actually a series, and that is the Imperium trilogy by Legrand. So I'm actually currently reading Lightbringer, and oh my gosh, I'm terrified, but I need to chat about Furyborn right now. I need to chat about it. I love this book so much, and Kingsbane, the sequel, is just as good, and I'm sure that I'm going to give you guys a glowing review of Lightbringer once I finish it, because this series is seriously so good, so let me tell you all about it. So the people who watch my channel very frequently are going to be tired of me at this point, because I have brought up Furyborn in I think my last 3 or 4 videos, all of my live reading sprints. This stays in my mind rent-free, and for good reason. I am here again to yell at you about this book because I want you to read it. But seriously, you're missing out if you have not picked up Furyborn because it is so good, and once I finish Lightbringer, I think it might be my new favorite YA fantasy series. So Furyborn follows 2 women in dual timelines. So you're following a woman named Riel in the past timeline, and then you're following Eliana in the current timeline. And Riel is destined to be the Sun Queen, which is basically this prophecy that has been instated since she's been born. She's always been told, oh, there's going to be a Blood Queen and there's going to be a Sun Queen, and then she shows magical abilities one day and everyone thinks her to be the Sun Queen. So she goes through these 7 elemental trials. And in Eliana's timeline, she is an assassin for the Empire. So she's kind of struggling with morality and thinking, oh, should I be doing these things for the Empire? Like, this kind of goes against my internal moral compass, and I don't necessarily want to be doing these things, but she has to just to live. This is just such a complex series. I love these characters with my entire being. Riel and Eliana are both fantastic protagonists, but there's also a lot of great side characters. I think that this book series is just perfect for anyone who likes a slow burn, character-driven fantasy series. I also would recommend this to readers who are looking for more new adult fantasy. Yes, this is YA fantasy, but I definitely think it reads on the more mature end. I do think that this could be enjoyed by a variety of ages. I just think that because it is so complex and character-driven, that this would really appeal to older readers in the YA genre. I also just really want to quickly talk about Kingsbane while we're here. I mean, come on, I literally annotated the heck out of this book and it destroyed me. So if you're looking for just an emotional roller coaster of a series, pick up Furyborn. You'll regret it, but you'll be happy that you read it. Like, I mean, I don't know how to tell you guys that like you're gonna live in fear of Legrand for the rest of your life, but you're gonna be happy because no one else can take me on such an emotional roller coaster. That's my end of the rant about Furyborn. Please just go read it, please. I'm tired of yelling. So the next book that I want to talk about is The Last Magician by Maxwell. So this is actually a 3-book series, and the 3rd book has not yet come out, but it is coming out very soon, I believe in April of this year. I am so excited for this last book in this series. I love this story so much, and how I like to pitch it is sort of as Avengers Infinity War meets Six of Crows meets historical fiction. So like, what don't you love about that premise? Like, I don't know what to tell you, but if that doesn't intrigue you about a story, like maybe your reading taste is just boring. I'm kidding. Please read whatever you want, but seriously, the premise of this series is fantastic. It follows a girl named Esta and a male protagonist named Hart, and I love them both so much. There's a lot of romantic tension in this series as well. So freaking good. Please go read it. I wish more people were talking about it. I seriously don't know where the hype is for this book. Like, what are y'all doing? You're not reading The Last Magician. I seriously don't know what you're doing with your time because it is a 5-star series for me. So just a quick synopsis of what The Last Magician is about. It follows a young girl named Esta who has the ability to travel back in time, and she is sent back to steal an ancient artifact that could possibly bring magic back. Doesn't that sound awesome? Please go read it. I love it so much. So the next young adult fantasy book that I want to talk about is actually An Ember in the Ashes. So this is a 4-book series, and I actually have only read book 1, but I am hoping to read A Torch Against the Night very soon because I literally cannot stop thinking about An Ember in the Ashes. It is so good. So An Ember in the Ashes follows 2 characters, Elias and Leigh, and one day Leia's brother is taken by the bad guys, and so Leia's like, okay, well I guess I gotta go get him back. So she goes to find the resistance to help her get her brother, and she's sent on this secret mission to the academy where Elias works at, or not works at, he trains at. I don't know why I said he works there. This is a YA Roman inspired fantasy series, and it is so good. Again, the characters are just really, really complex, and I love it so much. I would say that the only complaint I really have about this book is that sometimes some things that happened in the plot just felt a little bit convenient for me, and I actually do go more in depth in this in my Reading Like an Enneagram 2 video. So if you want my full reaction to reading An Ember in the Ashes for the first time, you can go watch that video, which I'll link in the cards as well as in the description. But really, this book was flawless beyond that. Like, I think that the character work was excellent. I loved the tone of this book. It felt very grim and dark for a YA fantasy, which is why I really appreciated it. I think that readers of all ages can read this and love it because it makes you realize, you know, like, life sucks, and like life in this Roman inspired fantasy sucks. These people are really going through some stuff, and it definitely pulled at some heartstrings for that. I guess I would pitch this one as Star Wars meets Children of Blood and Bone meets Roman inspired fantasy, and it's a fun time, but it will also make you cry, so we love that. This one also had some really fantastic side characters. I loved Helene, who is one of the other protagonists in this book. She was so complex and interesting to me, and I was actually way more interested in her plotline than I was Elias and Leia's at times, but I loved all the characters in this book. I wouldn't say I'm super attached to any of them besides Helene, but the plot was so intriguing that I think it really made up for that, and I think that because this is a series and I haven't continued, I think I will continue to get attached to these characters in the future books, and I just cannot wait to finish the series, so I definitely recommend this one, and I hear it only gets better from the first book. The next book that I want to recommend for YA fantasy readers might be a little bit of a hot take, but hear me out on this, okay? I want to recommend Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and this is another series that I haven't completed, but I have read Shadow and Bone and Siege and Storm, which are the first 2 books in the trilogy. I wouldn't say these are perfect books by any means. I think I gave them both 3.5 stars, and I really enjoyed them because they're just fun. If you are looking for a fun time, I would definitely pick up Shadow and Bone. I think it gets a lot of hate and slander that it does not deserve. Sure, is the rating perfect? No, it's not. There are a lot of things in this book series that bother me and irritate me, but I think it's a perfect recommendation for anyone who is just starting out with YA fantasy, who might feel overwhelmed by the genre. I think that Shadow and Bone is a great place to start because it has a very interesting magic system, but it's not too complex. I feel like it's easy to understand and get a good grasp on, and I also feel like the characters are pretty well laid out. Sure, they're gonna annoy you, but I think that does actually make a good character when they actually, you know, inspire wrath in you. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with all the decisions that the main characters are making in this novel, but I definitely want to know what their next move is and what their intentions are. So I would say Shadow and Bone is a great recommendation to start with YA fantasy, or if you are an avid YA fantasy reader, I would still honestly give these a shot. Again, don't go in expecting like the most glamorous, fantastic world building and writing. There's definitely some problems with it, but I think it's a staple for a reason. So if you don't know what Shadow and Bone is about, it follows a young girl named Alina who lives in the Grishaverse, or this Russian-inspired fantasy setting, and in this fantasy setting, there are people called Grisha who have magical abilities inspired by the elements. So it's kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender meets Raylo, because Alina is taunted by the Darkling, who is like this Kylo Ren figure, and we love the Darkling. I mean, he's an awful person, but he is so interesting. So Alina actually ends up meeting the Darkling after a battle where she discovers that she is a Grisha, and so the Darkling wants to use her power for purposes. We don't know what those purposes are, but Alina goes with him to the little palace, and there's just a great adventure with lots of classic YA tropes. It is just so much fun. Like, why aren't you guys reading Shadow and Bone? It's because you're too busy slandering it without even giving it a chance. I can understand why you wouldn't like Shadow and Bone, though. That's not what I'm saying here. But don't knock it till you try it. And also, for my Raylo lovers, this one is for you. Please go read it. Thank you. The next book that I want to talk about is Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angelis. And this book, oh my gosh, where do I start with this one except for the fact that it is perfection? Oh my goodness. Where Dreams Descend is one of the most interesting and complex YA fantasy books that I think I've ever read, except for the one that I'm going to talk about in the very end. I think that one is a little bit more complex for YA fantasy. Where Dreams Descend, absolutely immaculate, show-stopping, and you know what? It's ironic that we say it's show-stopping because it is the perfect combination of The Greatest Showman and Phantom of the Opera. What doesn't intrigue you about that? Literally, what does not intrigue you about that? This book is fantastic in terms of atmosphere. I think that the magic system is really intriguing because it's very muddled is how I would explain it. I think that there's not a lot explained about the magic system and the reader is really having to kind of form their own interpretation of it, and that is just so interesting to me, and I think that's such a distinct choice in a YA fantasy because usually it's all laid out for you like, okay, here's what we do and like here's what happens if this goes bad, or like, you know, there's like very concrete rules to magic systems. But I feel like in Where Dreams Descend, that is not the case. Like, you are very much interpreting it how you see fit, but I love that. It's like a choose your own adventure YA fantasy book, and we need more of those if I'm honest. Also, the romance in this book, there is a male protagonist who is definitely on my book boyfriend list. I loved everything about this book. I can't wait for the sequel, which I believe is coming out in June of this year, and you bet that the day it comes out, I'm going to be reading it. So I definitely recommend getting to this before the sequel comes out so that you can read it with me, you can cry with me about it. It's so good. Please go read it. My voice, it's tired. I'm tired of yelling. I'm going to have no voice by the end of this video because I'm literally just professing my love for all of these books. That's not gonna stop because we have one more book to talk about, and it is probably one of the ones I love the most on this list. I love all these books for different reasons, but listen guys, if you've ever watched my channel before, I'm so sorry because you know what's coming. You know I could not end this video without talking about Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Oh my goodness, you guys, Legendborn is that girl. And if you have not read it, you're missing out. I think about this book every day of my life. I already want to reread it so freaking bad. She lives in my mind rent-free, y'all. Rent freaking free. Legendborn follows a 16-year-old named Bree who recently lost her mother in a car accident. And so she's actually going to this early college program. And while she's at this college program, she notices something kind of bizarre happen on campus that she thinks has to do with her mother's death. And from that point, she is then launched into this secret society inspired by King Arthur. What can I say about this book besides that I love it? I want you to read it. I want everyone to reread it. I want to reread it. And it's just so good. The magic system in this one is definitely more complex than a lot of the other ones that I've talked about in this video, which is why I would say this is one that I think anyone can read, but I think it's definitely more catered to older YA readers because the magic system is definitely hard to grasp. I'm not sure I fully understand it. This magic system is so interesting. I love King Arthur and King Arthur inspired lore, so to see it in a fantasy setting like this, in an urban fantasy setting, my mind is absolutely blown. Those are like two of my favorite things in the entire world slapped together in one book. And then you have an awesome female protagonist who is just navigating through the world, navigating through her grief. There's also some really great social commentary in this book. And I don't know how Tracy Deonn did it, but she literally created a perfect book. She created a perfect book. And I cannot wait for the rest of the series. I don't know how many books it's gonna be, but I will be reading every single one of them. I will be rereading every single one of them because Tracy Deonn now owns me. She has my soul. So here are some of the books that I just talked about very aggressively and that I want you to read. These are some of my absolute favorite YA fantasy books, some of my favorite YA fantasy series, and I think that if you are trying to get into the genre or if you are an avid lover of this genre, these are absolute must reads. I love them all so much. I'm just rambling on now. My head's empty. I'm just thinking about all these characters and these magic systems and these worlds and how much I want to be in them instead of the world that we're in right now. Anyways, that is it for this video today. I hope that these recommendations were helpful. Let me know what your favorite YA fantasy books are in the comment section down below. I would love to know and to add to my ever-growing TBR. Also, don't forget to check out my description because I have my Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Amazon wishlist, all that good stuff in there. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and until next time, bye!